Welcome into our Hear Me, See Me podcast. This is a project of WIBW Television where we are working all year long to raise awareness of mental health and issues surrounding the conversation of mental health awareness. We're talking about a tough one today, and that is suicide, loss of loved ones to suicide. And the conversation is centering around a family and a story that they certainly hope they would never have to tell, but they are sharing it because it is a very important one. Damon Quigley was only 13 years old when he took his own life. His mom, Brenda, dad, Ron, and his siblings have worked since then to find a purpose in Damon's life, and they have founded Damon's Purpose. Brenda Quigley is with us today to talk about this experience, the journey that you have followed. And I do want to let everyone know, as we're having this conversation, if you see any struggles in yourself or a loved one, please remember the 988 Suicide Prevention Lifeline is there to help you 24/7 if you have anything in your own life that you think you need help right now as you're listening to this today. Because Brenda, we met before. I shared your story. Gosh, has it been almost 5 years ago now?
3.
Oh,
it was 3, yep.
Time flies. Time flies. And one thing that you shared at that time is that we can't fix what we don't know is broken.
Yes.
So what happened with Damon?
He, it seemed as if it was a normal morning. It was January 19th of 2021. And if we remember back to that day, the world was kind of in crisis with COVID. And the night before, on January 18th, he had been put back into another quarantine for an exposure to COVID. And it was his third one since, I think it was December 1st. And so, looking back on that time myself, I know that everyone, myself included, and a lot of people around me, felt anxious. We all felt anxious, and we all felt like uncertainty in what was happening. And so I imagine that's probably what he felt like, but for whatever reason just chose not to share that with us.
And what type of, before we get into the rest of that day, let's put up Damon's picture so we can look at Damon, forever 13. But what kind of kid was he? What was he involved in? What did he love? What were his passions?
He was a very outgoing boy. Oh my gosh, he loved sports. Baseball was his favorite. He loved all sports. He had the body of a football player, so you would have thought that football was his favorite, but he really loved baseball. Basketball, loved it all. He loved to be outside. He loved the water, loved the lake. We would go fishing and boating, and he loved to be pulled around on a tube. And he had a lot of friends. He was smart, but I'll be honest, he really didn't like to do his homework because, that took up too much time. Right, yeah. So he had a lot of friends. He was very popular. He was kind and very happy. He and I shared a lot of the same interest. We had just recently gotten into doing some woodworking together, and that gave us time to spend together even more when everything was kind of shut down there for a while, and so that was really nice. So
happy, social.
Yep.
No signs, no expression of anything going on.
Not to us. Even like to look back on it, there's things I can think of that, was that a sign? But it just seemed like typical teenage boy behavior, nothing. And we've kind of worked through that and shared some of our thoughts with professionals, and they're like, yeah, really, that's not. He worked probably very hard to not show those signs for whatever reason, I don't know.
Which is why we have these conversations, because we've heard from other folks who we visited with that you do need to check on your well friends, because while we have warning signs that experts talk about, experts also say sometimes there aren't necessarily those warning signs, which is where the conversations need to come in. Regularly check in with your friends who seem well, because you just don't know. So we go to what was the last day of Damon's life. What happened that morning? What was going on as you were leaving for work?
It was I guess I would say it was a normal morning. I'm a registered nurse, and so my life did not shut down during COVID. So I had my regular work schedule, and he was in quarantine, so he had to, he was up before I left. Reminded him, don't forget to get on your Zoom classes today. And he said, he was frustrated with the whole thing, and he said, Mom, if I'm going to be in quarantine again, will you at least stop and pick me up some of the good snacks? And I said, okay, what do you want me to get? And he said, I want some, I think he said Goldfish, Cheez-Its, and Gatorade. And so, I mean, we had plans for that evening.
Exactly.
We had plans. He told me a couple of things he wanted to do with me when we got home. I was like, yeah, as soon as I get home, wait till I get home, we'll do that together, And so we had plans, and I gave him a hug and a kiss and told him I loved him, and he had had this curly hair on top that he had grown out. We didn't know he had natural curly hair and, until COVID, and we didn't get haircuts. And I just remember ruffling his curls and being like, okay, we'll see you tonight. I love you, and don't forget to do your schoolwork. And it was just a normal day.
And he said, I love you too.
Yeah, love you too. Yeah.
And again, when we talk about warning signs, sometimes it's that they withdraw, they don't want their favorite things, they aren't planning for the future. He was planning for that day, for that evening when you came home.
So I have done, being a nurse, I feel like I'm a lifelong learner. And so I had to know, I had to learn, I had to read, and I read and I researched about suicide, and I came across a quote that I feel like embodies what I believe was going on. And these aren't my words, Ben, I don't know who said them, but it was, suicide is oftentimes an impulsive decision made in a moment of crisis. That, I think, could not explain it more. An impulsive decision. I mean, you look up the word impulsive and a 13-year-old boy's picture is going to be beside the word impulsive, made in a moment of crisis. And I believe that Damon probably felt like, the whole world was in crisis, and he probably felt like his world was in crisis. And maybe he didn't know how to say it. Maybe he didn't want to disappoint us. I really don't know. I won't ever know. And I did have someone who had lost a family member to suicide, and she said, one of the things you're going to have to learn is to stop asking why, because even if you had a list of his whys, it wouldn't make sense. It just wouldn't make sense to you because your brain is not feeling the way his did in that moment.
And you're right. Think about the teenage brain.
Yeah.
As adults, we can rationalize this too will pass. This moment will pass. Things will get better. Maybe not in an hour, maybe not tomorrow, but we know things will get better. We'll find our way. A 13-year-old doesn't necessarily, or a 15-year-old, or a 16-year-old, or a 22-year-old doesn't necessarily have that capacity yet.
No. And a lot of adults during that time struggled. As a nurse, I saw that. We dealt with a lot of people who had never faced anxiety or never had depression, but in those moments during COVID and during quarantine and lockdown, a lot of us shared feelings that we'd never had before. And so I don't think we can completely understand the impact that those moments had on us and what was happening to not just even teenagers and kids, but to adults as well.
As that day went on, when did you realize something was wrong?
Ron had called me and said, I haven't been able to get a hold of Damon today. And I said, well, that doesn't surprise me. His classes are over and he's probably got his headset on playing his Xbox or PlayStation. And so I had called my parents and said, well, will you go over and just check on him? And my dad found him.
But that's not the end of the story. It may have been the end of Damon's life on Earth, but it certainly isn't the end of the story.
It was not.
After the initial shock, how long did it take your family, because he has two siblings, right, a brother and sister, you have 3 children, what were those conversations like in your own family as you processed the shock that I imagine you were going through that day?
Yes. We realized a lot of things about ourselves, that how similar we are in some areas of our lives, but how different we were and how different people process grief differently. And so we got into therapy right away as a family to realize what was healthy and how it was healthy to grieve together and how we could support each other. So that was very important. But I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I don't think we would be here today sharing the story and grieving as healthy as you can without the community support that we had.
You're from a small town.
Yes.
And like Corning, go through 3 streets and you're done.
Yeah. Yes. It's the best little town.
Yes.
But yeah, and so I grew up there, and I know everybody, and everybody knew Damon. And Ron and I have done a lot of, been to a lot of places and talked to a lot of people who have lost a family member to suicide. And one of the things that we were kind of shocked to find out is that the support and encouragement we received is not typical all the time. That people don't know what to say or they don't know what to do, and so it's easier to avoid going and supporting the family. But what we found, and I'm not talking about just Corning, we're so unique in where we live that we're just made up of a bunch of little towns, and we all know each other. And so our family, our community, our friends, they showed up in droves, and they supported us. And if that had not happened, I mean, I don't know if I would feel comfortable sharing our story, but there's a part of me that feels like people thought, if it could happen to Damon, could it happen to them? And I knew right away we could not let that happen, that I did not want any other family to go through it. But more than that, I didn't want any other child to feel, or person, I should say, adults too, to feel that they couldn't share those feelings, that they couldn't ask for help. And so that really was my driving force.
And it was a very, very bold, very public first step you all took. It
Yes.
was in Damon's obituary.
It was, yes.
What did you write, and why did you decide to include that?
I think that looking back, I think there's times in our lives that we look back and we don't realize the impact of a moment. And I sat down the day after Damon died. I very clearly remember sitting at my mom and dad's kitchen table, and my sister was sitting beside me, and my laptop was in front, and I'm starting to write his obituary, and that's a horrific moment.
Right.
That's horrific. And I said, do you think it's okay? I asked Ron and the kids, is it okay to say that he died by suicide? And I didn't realize the impact of that question, where that would lead us. And they said, yeah, why would you not? That's what happened. Everybody knows that's what happened. And so we did, and I think by doing that, it kind of, it brought out into the light things that we like to keep in the dark. Like, we don't like to talk about it. We don't like to face those things sometimes. But in that moment, bringing that out into the light, people that weren't from our community and didn't know us, they began to reach out and to support us and share their stories.
As I got older, having those tools, especially from going to therapy and things like that, helped me, and part of my personality, helped me to be able to process some of the things that were happening around me and made me want to be able to give commentary on it. And that's what led me to start writing.
What was happening around you?
So I talk about this on one of my songs. I remember down the street from me, I had a friend who lived in a house that had no door, no front door. Mother was addicted to drugs. He lived next door to my church, a few houses down from my church. And I remember seeing the difference between my house and his house and going like, what's going on here? I remember going to Scott. It's a dual language school now, but it used to be a computer technology magnet school.
Back when computers were a rare thing, and that was like a super cool
right.
thing
It was
to have in
special
a
to
school,
have
right?
computers at your school, right? And so I remember going to Scott and being with my friends and just seeing the differences. I remember, I remember getting called a tar baby for being too dark, for my skin being too dark. I remember seeing different things happening in my family as far as run-ins with the law. I remember police coming and looking for my father and treating us really bad in my community. It was just a lot of different things that were going on. And then in my family struggles or like my mother did, like bipolar depression. And so I had clinical manic depression. And so my mood would shift and swing irregardless of what was happening in my life. And then these other things would compound on top of that. And so trying to understand what's going on, how am I feeling, how should I feel? I remember getting to, what else was I? Probably 15, listening to rap music, which my mom did not want me to listen to, but it got in there. And then I was like, the people in this song say that they're poor. Their life sounds like my life. Mom, are we poor? And she just laughed. She's like, yes, baby, we're poor. And I'm like, oh, I had no idea. But just understanding my reality. And then I went to school on the west side of town. I went from the east side of town. I was in the gifted program. So I go to French middle school. And man, that was I don't want to talk bad about the school. but it was a really segregated place. Not by the administration, but the blacks hung out with the blacks, the whites hung out with the whites, the Hispanics hung out with the Hispanics. And I was there in the middle, Mr. I love everybody, I wanna hug everybody, everybody should get along, trying to navigate that space. And then I went to high school and it was more of the same, but more extreme, and trying to navigate that space. So like racial tension and not having any sort of framework to understand what I'm experiencing, but trying to make sense of it. So.
Your mom, it sounds like, was a good role model for you, even as you watched her struggle. Do you feel like there was that sense in herself that she knew what her struggles were, and therefore she was doing whatever she could in her power to make sure that those struggles didn't compound in you, the next generation? Because she was able, she accepted putting you into therapy when you were 6 years old.
Oh yeah, man. I look back and I was so blessed to have my mother. Like, she struggled with her mental health and still does, but when I see people that are unwilling to get help or are affected by that stigma around mental health help, I'm like, wow, I never had that. From as early as my mom could, she put me into therapy. She was in therapy. So I got to see her process. And that's my hero. That's my hero. And when my dad left, I became what I felt like was the spiritual leader in my household. And so I'd pray for my mom and sit with my mom, and I'd help my mom process, and we were like best friends. And when my mom was struggling with suicidal ideation, she'd come home and tell me. And we would talk about, man, I thought about driving off a bridge today. I thought about this and that and the third. And that helped me to go, I never want to commit suicide, because I remember how it made me feel to even hear my mom speak about that. And she said, I'll never do it though, because I don't want to leave you alone. And no matter how bad things got, I could always remember my mom saying, like, I'd never do that to you. And so I'm like, well, I can't do that to her.
That's kind of heavy for a kid, though, to hear that from their mom. I mean, on the one hand, that openness is refreshing, and it makes you feel comfortable in being able to, we say, hear me, see me. It makes you comfortable in speaking up so that people can hear you and see you. But on the other hand, as a kid, was there pressure? Did you, I mean.
Yeah. And I don't think she intentionally put that pressure on me, but I think my personal philosophy is, when you live around dangers for your children, I would rather prepare them for those dangers than to hope they never experience them.
At a certain level, you're going to have to know who you are. And if you don't have that confidence, figure it out. And there's ways to do that. There's pathways to it. And here's another hypocritical thing that I did. So when I was a Marine Corps captain, I was fake strong, and I was drinking when I wasn't at work, right? And I would have Marines that were dealing with some pretty serious stuff when they were home. Just back from Iraq, Afghanistan, Africa, who knows where, dealing with a lot of complicated issues at home or at work. But fundamental complexities in life, which made life very difficult, and to the point where like suicide became an option. And I would encourage them to get help and to enter a treatment program while I was at the same time suffering and not taking the same advice that I was given, out of fear of being taken out of the game.
What advice would you offer to people to prepare them? I think particularly perhaps maybe a veteran who's transitioning out of active duty back to that civilian life, because sometimes some of the struggle comes from no one prepares you for what's going to happen next. No one prepares you for suddenly that whole group of built-in brothers and sisters that you had is not there every day, because they've gone back to their homes as well. That person regimenting your life and telling you you're going to be here at this time, here at this time, here at this time, and now suddenly you've got all this time and no one's telling you what to do with it. I guess I liken it to, as a survivor of violent crime, I wish people would have told me that you're going to have this anxiety in a certain situation. You're going to perhaps wake up in the middle of the night and have this feeling.
Right.
You know, you're going to have these reactions. These things are going to happen. What is perhaps the biggest thing you've learned that you could pass on to veterans who are facing that same transition?
Are you familiar with the artist Kendrick Lamar? Do you know who that is? The rapper.
him, yes.
I'm a huge fan. He's got a song, High Power, and it's like, and one of the quotes in it is, build your own pyramids and write your own hieroglyphs. So you have to self-manifest some of these things. If you're leaving the service, if you're entering retirement, so say, forget the military stuff. If you're doing anything of consequence that you've invested and sacrificed a majority of your life to, that has come with a cost. Have a plan. Have a plan. Going back to, for service members, for men and women exiting the military, have a plan and stick to the plan. And it could be something as simple as, if you want to live somewhere new, do that, move there and get a job, have a mission, have a purpose. Every one of us was excited, I certainly was, to get out. I couldn't wait to get out. And when I got out, I missed the Marines. I still miss Marines. I didn't miss the Marine Corps, but I definitely missed my Marines. And for those of us that survived, we are all forever bonded and we're close. And I could call any one of them up at any minute. And it's a reminder of who we were, good and bad.
How do we become better listeners?
I think sometimes it's about practicing silence, right? So I can be present with you and I want to hear what you're saying, but I also want to be able to feel what you're saying. So we call that active listening. Active listening means I'm in a place where I'm going to receive from you in order to identify what I need to give you back. Sometimes that give back is simply the presence of knowing that you were heard and you were seen. And other times it's about gleaning enough information to give you back, hey, so what I heard you say was, how can we get that? Or you have an appointment coming up and you're telling me that you're fearful. Is there someone that can go with you, right? Or can I go with you? Being able to be that for your person and knowing that typically when a person is struggling and they're needing you to listen, they're not needing you to fix it. So if I could give anyone a tip, it's recognizing that people aren't looking to be fixed, they're looking to be heard.
If we are the person who is struggling, needs that support, the flip side of that is, how do we keep from falling into the trap of, well, yes, we know we're struggling and we want someone to listen to us, but I also don't want you to feel bad as you're listening, so I try to make you more comfortable. And by that, for example, the best I can give is to give personal experience after I was a victim of violent crime and I would run into people, sometimes you'd see people who'd be like, well, kind of what you were saying, give people grace. I wanted to reach out, but I didn't know what to say to you, because it is awkward. Right. I mean, how do you say to somebody, right, so, what was it, how are you doing after you had that gun to your head, or after your loved one passed away, whatever the situation might be. Or sometimes after that, then, you'd find yourself then, or I at least would find myself trying to put them at ease and make them more comfortable. When I guess, when you reflect on it, that's really not my job. Correct. I'm the one who's struggling. I'm the one who needs some support right now. I shouldn't be making you feel better about it.
Right. And I think it's just that. It is just that. It is recognizing within ourselves that our experience is just that. It's ours. And if someone is inviting themselves to journey with us, then they're saying that they're prepared to walk alongside of us. And I don't have to make you feel comfortable. And recognizing that my journey, this journey we're taking together, will have some uncomfortable spaces. And I don't have to make you feel better, and you don't have to make me feel better. The journey is how I get better.
Fantastic advice. Does it always have to be professional help?
Absolutely not.
I mean, so for you, when your kids were in the NICU and you said nobody really knows what that experience is like, did you find other NICU parents that you could connect with so you could kind of share, even though you all are in your own unique experiences and spaces, you at least have that shared experience?
Yes. So I do distinctly remember one mom that we shared experiences with each other. We connected just meeting for coffee in the NICU, visiting at the same times, or running into each other, checking in, like genuinely checking in, and being able to say, this is the roughest journey I've traveled. My twins were born. There were several other twin sets, and they all ended up in schools together.
I was going to say, how old are your twins now?
Yeah, my twins are amazing. Awesome. They are amazing. They're 22, just had a birthday, so they're fabulous. But I think that recognizing that we all are traveling a different journey, but we can still connect and communicate was amazing. So I don't believe that everyone needs a professional to get help if we're able to create and have genuine and authentic interactions with people in our life that allows us space to heal naturally and without a professional, right? So I think that it's important to have people that we see, people that we hear, and people that see and hear us. That may be organically in your family, it may be in some of your friendships, it may be in support groups that you find. I think that support groups are amazing. I tell people that you need a therapist if whatever you are experiencing begins to interfere in your functional ability to do life. If your functioning is deteriored in any way, then you need support who is trained to help get you on track. It's not about your friends not being good enough. It's really about getting the support that is necessary to prevent you from being in a severe or dangerous situation. I felt like I was in a very dangerous situation to get behind the wheel of a car, driving erratically, racing to my mom. That was a very bad space to be in. I'm glad that I had my mom and she was back to the degree that I could get what I needed from her. But I don't want others to do that. I want you to feel like, you know what, I'm having some really bad thoughts. I need to talk to my mom. I need to talk to my brother, my sister, my best friend, because they're gonna love me unconditionally in spite of what I'm thinking or feeling. I want you to be able to say, you know, my depression is curbing my appetite. My depression is interfering in my sleep. Or maybe I don't even recognize that it's depression like I didn't. And I wake up one day and I'm like, wow, I've gained 20 pounds. I haven't been to the gym. I'm not eating well. Something's wrong here. Talk to your primary care doctor. They will get you in the headed in the right direction, but you have to say something.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it can provide answers. You have shared that ADHD was a lesson you didn't know about till you were an adult.
I was an adult, absolutely.
How did that help you understand yourself and then maybe come up with some of those other strategies that assisted you getting through everything else?
Yeah, the biggest thing was I learned why it was so difficult for me to keep things organized, right? It was like things would be everywhere. I might know exactly where it is, but everyone else just sees pure chaos around me. So learning that I was an adult learner doing life with these ADHD features. So for me, it presented as just pure chaos, losing things, disorganized and missing deadlines. And that, you know, in case management, you can't do any of those things. So for me, it was about learning the skills. So here are some things I can learn to organize, use sticky notes. Sticky notes are my best friend now. And learning how to allow others to help. So I might say to someone, hey, you're really good at organizing. There's this project or this piece of a project that really needs someone who can organize. That's not my strong suit. Would you mind doing that? So it allowed me to learn how I could use someone else's strengths and my areas of growth and learn to work together so that the projects got done and they were fabulous, right? So it was about learning about myself and recognizing that those things didn't mean that they were a weakness, but they were areas where I needed growth. And in learning that I could grow in those meant partnering with other people who had those skills and then learning how to incorporate some of those things that would work for me.
I think finally, too, your whole life is a lesson in hope.
Yeah.
How do we not lose sight of the hope?
I think just remembering that it isn't about the moment, it's about the lifespan. And so when I look at my life, I can tell you some really horrible stories about my life, but I get to choose which of those stories sit in the forefront. And I choose the happy stories. I choose those stories that represent victory and triumph. I recently was in an article and I shared that there are many great things about my life. Growing up with a lot of African American educators, seeing people that looked like me be successful gave me hope. And so if you could identify one thing in your life, whether it's a family member, a goal that you're working towards, even your own face, you know, I often tell people, I promise if you meet me once, you'll never forget you met me. It's not out of arrogance, it's out of the sheer fact that I'm somebody great that everyone should know. I believe that. And so when you believe in something huge about yourself, it will propel you to keep going. So in spite of what you're looking at, remember, it's a moment in the time. It's not an identifier of your entire life. Keep going. It gets better.
Well, I believe in you too.
Yay, thanks. I'm glad you like me.
Felicia Glass, it is always amazing to visit with you. I appreciate you so very much. I learned things today. We do want everyone to know that if you are experiencing a crisis or someone you love is experiencing a crisis, the 988 hotline is there for you to help. If you'd like to reach out to other resources, we have a whole bunch of them locally around Northeast Kansas and nationwide organizations that can help you connect. Go to wibw.com/hearmeseeme. It is all there for you. Felicia, thank you. And to just everyone, we hear you, we see you, and thank you. You matter.